Hey everyone, today I'm going to be reviewing the Dayton HTA200. It is a hybrid tube amplifier. So solid state amplifier section, tube preamplifier section. This amplifier costs about $350 if you buy it new. You can get it from Parts Express, you can get it from Amazon or whatever. Currently it's out of stock, but I couldn't hold off anymore because I just think this thing is too cool. And I wanted to go ahead and put the review out there to get you thinking about it if you are interested in buying something like this. And before I forget, this was loaned to me by Dayton directly. So, if you want to read any kind of influence into that, feel free, but that's where it came from. Although the cost is $350, it actually cost me more money. It cost me about $1,000. Why? Because I bought the Van Alstyne ABX comparator. The reason I bought this is because I wanted to do blind testing with this amplifier versus other amplifiers. And the reason I wanted to do that is because I wanted to see, can I actually hear a difference? Now, we always see people talking about this amplifier works better with this speaker, or this amplifier sounds this way. I am of the belief that the majority of amplifiers do what they're supposed to do. They don't color the sound, they don't alter the response, and as long as you use the correct speaker or the correct load and stay within the power range that you're supposed to, then you're going to be fine. And I've been doing this for a long time, and that's really what I found. But with this speaker, with an amplifier like this, I expected that it was going to be colored. I heard some things that I thought, well, that's odd. And then I looked at the measurements and I saw, okay, well, that's where it is. But I didn't feel comfortable enough just saying that I heard these differences. I wanted to prove them to you and to myself. So that's where the ABX comparator comes into play. The summarized version of the comparator is that it allows me to truly blind test between different sources, amplifiers, and speakers. So in this case, what I did was I compared it against a Weem amp and then also against an NAD C3050. In my blind testing, which is, I don't know what's going on. The comparator has relays built in. You plug the sources up, plug the amplifiers up, and then the comparator basically will switch between amplifiers. And I had the same source every time. So then I'm just switching between amplifiers, level matched to within about half a decibel. I have no idea what's playing. There's no lights, no anything that tells me what's playing. And it's doing it all as a black box, if you will. And then when I run through my 8 tests, completely blind, no idea what's playing, I can see, okay, test 1 was amplifier A. Test 2 was amplifier A. Test 3 was amplifier B, and so on. It's very random and you have no idea what's going on. So what I do is I listen, I take a note. I go to the next test. I take a note. Oh, this one sounds a little bit different. Okay, well then they must be different amplifiers. And then I'm just listening for differences, not necessarily which one I like the most in this particular case, but do I hear a difference? That's the first test. And 3 rounds of testing with 8 tests each, so 24 total tests, I was able to identify not necessarily the Dayton amplifier, but the fact that I was listening to different amplifiers. So 100% of the time, I was able to identify that these are different amplifiers. And the telltale sign for me was that the bass was pushed up more on the lower end. And maybe that's what most people would call a warm sound. That's probably what I would call it. Typically, when I talk about a warm sound, I'm talking about elevated mid-bass, lower mid-range, and then maybe slightly rolled off highs. So when I go back and look at the data, which I'm going to show you in a little bit, there is about 1.5 decibel of bump around 100 hertz, and it's between 50 hertz and about 500 hertz. There's this large area of a bumped up curve, which gives warmth to the speakers that I was listening to. The speakers that I was listening to were the Kef Blade 2 Metas, just fantastic speakers, extremely neutral. And with those, they have a very linear bass profile. So the extra bass that I was getting out of the Dayton HTA200, to me, just was unnecessary. I didn't necessarily need it, and I wasn't fond of it. However, you might have speakers that maybe they roll off a little bit early, or as one of my patrons noted, Sometimes there are speakers that are designed with less baffle step, and they're designed that way because they are intended to be put closer to a wall behind them. And in doing so, it kind of lifts up that lower mid range, that lower mid bass, and it gives you a little bit more to that particular region. But let's say that you're a regular old consumer and you don't have any idea because the manufacturer didn't tell you you need to put this speaker close to a wall. So you brought it out from the wall and you feel like something's just missing. You happen to stumble across this HTA200 or maybe another amplifier that has that same kind of frequency response curve to it, if you will, and where it lifts up that lower mid range, lower mid bass, upper mid bass area. And then you think, oh, wow, that's what I've been missing. It's the amplifier that makes all the difference. And listen, I could argue both ways. I could say, well, you're not using the speaker the way it was designed. Is that the manufacturer's fault? Yeah, probably. They should tell you how it's designed to be used. But does it mean that it's wrong for you to find an amplifier that does some things that alter the response of the sound system that you're listening to? No, I don't think there's anything wrong with it. In other words, this basically provides an EQ profile to the speakers that you're listening to. Now, as I said with the KEF Blade 2 Meta, it wasn't a profile that I liked, but maybe speakers that have a more shelved bass response or maybe a shelved mid-range response right below maybe 500 hertz. I could see the case for an amplifier like this to solve any concerns that you have. And I'm not being political, I'm just being analytical about this. Honestly, it's very interesting to me when I have products that do certain things that are so audible that there's zero question as to what's going on, and I'm able to pass the ABX completely blind testing 100% of the time, and then I have the data that clearly shows me what is going on. Now, you may be wondering, well, were you hearing added distortion, right? And I get it. Because we've all been told that tube amplifiers or tube preamps add color, and they do that through distortion. I've never come across, and I'm not saying it's not been said, but I'm telling you, I have never come across anybody saying that the reason for the coloration of anything tube related or systems that are tube related is due to the frequency response. It's almost, well, it is always, again, from what I've seen, with respect to distortion. Now, distortion is a funny thing, right? Like, you don't hear it until you hear it. So where's that middle ground of hearing it? Listen, it depends on you. It depends on not necessarily your environment, but maybe how quiet the environment is. Mainly it depends on the speakers, and it can depend on the music that you're listening to. Maybe if it's very complex music, you will excite some more distortions that you might not otherwise have excited if you're listening to music that just has a couple notes and it's not really a big deal. On the flip side, if you have distortion right in an area where you have that one note, then you might hear the overtones of that as a odd order distortion, and it may stand out more to you, especially if it's like fifth order or higher. But again, for the most part, if I'm being honest, I would say the distortion really is rarely a factor. And when it becomes a factor, it's an offensive factor. So with all of that said, what I was hearing, I don't believe had anything to do with increased distortion, which this does have. It has everything to do with the change in the frequency response. I'm going to take a break from my talking, and we're going to go just over a few specs that I think are important about this particular amplifier, and then I'm going to show you some data. First off, this amplifier is rated at 100 watts per channel at 4 ohm with a THD of 1.5%. They state the minimum speaker impedance is about 4 ohm. This amplifier has a Toslink optical input, a subwoofer output, which is full range, Bluetooth, a PC USB input, digital coax, auxiliary RCA inputs, and phono RCA inputs as well. The other thing that I like about this is just the overall look. I mean, listen, I'm a sucker for neat looking items and gadgets. And I think this is a neat looking amplifier. I think it's cool. It has all sorts of sources, as you can see. And the really cool thing about it is it also has VU meters. I'm a sucker for VU meters. The subwoofer output is full range, as I said. And when you use it, it does not engage a high pass filter for the mains. And to be fair, I did not like that about the Fozzy ZA3. You guys probably heard me rant about it. I got a lot of people saying, who cares, Aaron? It's not a big deal. But to me, it's a big deal. If there's something with a subwoofer output, I want it to also have a high pass filter. This doesn't do that. I'm not going to complain about it anymore because I know you're sick of hearing me whine about it, but just know that I didn't forget me saying that about the Fozzy, and it still holds true for the HTA. This also has a bass and treble knob where you can kind of control the contour of the bass and treble. And while I did not measure that myself, you can find those measurements in SoundStage Network's website. I'm going to include it in the description below. SoundStage has a write-up by Dennis Berger, which is really fun to read. I suggest you go do that. But then they also have a boatload of measurements. And listen, I can't even begin to touch everything that you see here. But what I can do is provide some basic sanity check measurements, which is what I am going to do in this review. And most importantly, I'm going to link those sanity check measurements to why I heard what I heard and why this amplifier does sound different than a neutral amplifier. The first measurements we're going to look at are the frequency response with a 4 ohm and 8 ohm static load, as well as 2 reactive loads, which are a simple and a complex load. Now, if you look at the response right here, what you should be seeing for a neutral amplifier is a flat line at 0 decibels, flat line from 10 hertz to 20 something kilohertz. Okay. But you notice that that is definitely not the case with this particular amplifier. All of the loads from static and reactive are pretty much the same. There is a little bit of variance in the complex frequency response by about maybe 0.2 of a decibel, but I'm not too concerned about that. And maybe a little bit right here, maybe like a 1/10 of a decibel. But for the most part, there doesn't seem to be any load dependency, meaning that it doesn't really matter what speaker you use with this amplifier. It's still going to change the frequency response in the same way. Now, if we go down here, we can look, see this, there were about 1.5 decibels at around, I said 100 hertz, I was wrong. It's about 50 or 60 hertz, right? And then around 20 hertz is where you come back down. And on the higher end, you come back down at around 500 hertz. So you've got 20 to 500 hertz where you've got a pretty big bump right there. And you may think that 1.5 decibels isn't a lot. But again, when I was doing my blind testing, having no idea what amplifier was playing, either with the NAD C3050 or the Weem amp, I always picked out that Dayton HTA200. I didn't know it was the Dayton, but I knew that it was a different amplifier. 100% of the time, super easy to tell. The interesting thing to me was I didn't notice so much a difference in the top end. I definitely noticed a difference in the bottom end. Now, as I said earlier, some speakers may have what we consider a lack of baffle step compensation. And to show you what I mean, here is an example. Okay, this is the Klipsch RP6000F2 floor standing speaker. And you see right through here, the speaker is relatively neutral. I mean, relatively flat on axis in the response. But around 200 to 300 hertz, we kind of take a dip here at about 3 decibels or so. This is a speaker that would benefit from being placed closer to the wall. In doing so, the bass is smoothed out and more flattened out to match the mid-range and higher frequency area. And when you go and look at an amplifier that does the same thing that this Dayton is doing, you can actually make the case for, hey, well, maybe this amplifier will help the speaker sound more full. It'll fill in maybe that missing bass if the owner doesn't have the speaker placed close to the wall. Even though it's designed to be placed close to the wall, maybe they just don't know that. And this amplifier might help fill that in. Now, this is a dangerous area where you get into mixing and matching components to try to target a certain sound. And this is why I really like having the data, because with the data, you can say this speaker is doing this before it goes into the room, and this amplifier is doing this before I connect it to my speaker, right? And you can get an idea for, okay, maybe there's something I need more out of my system. Can I do that with EQ? Do I want to do that by playing and mixing and matching of parts? If you want to do the latter, that is totally your prerogative. And I gotta say that with this little guy at about 350 bucks, I could see where somebody may say, I want this to be the focal point of my system. So maybe I'm going to try to find a speaker that would benefit from having the response that it does. I could see that case being made. It's just not necessarily the way I would go about it. This is pretty much the same thing as you just saw, but this is with an 8 ohm load, left and right channel to show you kind of how the matching is between the two. And then the green line represents the subwoofer output. And you can see that even though they say it's full range, it's actually not completely full range. It starts to roll off maybe around like 500 hertz or so, right? In this area, it starts to fall down. This is power versus distortion. And with a standard solid state amplifier, what you would typically see is a line maybe around 60 decibels, negative 60 decibels, falling down, and then around maybe rated power, it starts increasing a lot. But with this particular amplifier, we see that it's just continuously increasing in distortion. I would say that the maximum power based on this knee for 8 ohm is about 90 watts. For 4 ohm, I'd say it's around, I think that's close to about maybe 140 to 150 watts. And then for the simple load, it's a little bit higher than 8 ohm. And for the complex load, it's a little bit higher. It's maybe around 200 to, 210 watts or so. It just depends on where you draw this line. Another test is the noise floor. What is the noise floor capability of this amplifier? In this case, it's about 80 decibels down. That's in yellow. In red is the lowest noise floor that I can possibly measure with my equipment. And that's at around 150, 160 decibels, just depending on where you're looking. Now, if you want to compare that to something like, again, maybe the Weem amp, let's check that out. All right, this is the Weem amp, and it's at the bottom of what my gear is able to measure. So it's super low, which really just means to you that the Dayton HTA is kind of noisy. Are you going to hear it? If you have higher sensitivity speakers, or maybe if you're sitting close, you might hear it. Let's say like you have pro audio compression drivers in your system, then you might hear some background noise. It's always hard to say for sure that you're going to hear that noise because it does depend on the sensitivity of your speakers and how far away you are. In my particular case, listening to the Kepler 2 Metas at about 10 feet away, I didn't hear any additional background noise. Let's talk about THD. I mentioned it earlier, but let's just see what happens to THD for this amplifier. This is at 1 watt output at 4 ohm. Both channels driven. Second harmonic is in red. Third harmonic is in this orange color, and you can just follow the rest down. This line right here is actually THD, and the second harmonic is dominating factor here. So the THD is dominated by second order distortion at 1 watt. Now let's ramp it up and go to 5 watts. Now we've got half a percent of total harmonic distortion. And then I'm going to ramp it up to 100 watts at 4 ohm. Now we're at 2%. And then if we go to 186 watts, which is pretty much the maximum that I was able to get out of this amplifier, we can see that we're probably around maybe 3% or so. And the third order distortion here is starting to really separate from these other higher orders distortions. That does it for this review. Honestly, I think this amp is really cool. It has plenty of power to provide you with the output that you need for most any system, I would think. If you're looking for something that's just neat and different and doesn't cost you an arm and a leg, but also has a lot of different input options for $350, I really wholeheartedly recommend this guy. The frequency response curves out of this amplifier are definitely audible, at least to me, especially on the low end. On the higher end, maybe not so much to me. If I had EQ'd that lower end down and focused more on the higher end, then I might have noticed that 1 decibel or so discrepancy. But the low end is really what stood out to me to be the most prominent feature in terms of the tonal characteristic of the amplifier. And honestly, I can't believe that I'm saying the quote tonal characteristic of the amplifier, but I've got ABX testing that I passed 100% of the time, not golden ears. It was just an obvious change. And I've got data that shows me exactly what I was hearing because I knew that it was lower bass. I just didn't know what that profile was until I saw the data. And honestly, I think this stuff is really freaking cool. I'm super excited about being able to do more tests with this ABX comparator. I've already been using it for some of my speaker tests, one of which I just had to take down until I can figure out what's going on and not have to deal with any more drama. You guys know what I'm talking about. But it's going to be a staple in my reviews from now on. And if you are interested in more kind of feedback from me about how I was doing these tests and what I was listening to and for, please let me know in the comments and I'll make sure to maybe give a little bit more info or maybe make a separate dedicated video for the ABX comparator portion of my reviews. With all of that said, I will talk to you all later. And if you would like to support this channel, you can do so at patreon.com/Erin's Audio Corner, or you can use any of my generic affiliate links that'll be in the description. Amazon, Crutchfield. I don't have one for Parts Express. I don't know. I've got a bunch of them down there. Just if you need to buy anything from underwear to deodorant or speakers or TVs or whatever, feel free to click those links. I would certainly appreciate it. I will talk to you all later. Have a good one. Peace.